Hi guys, today I'm sitting down with two people who have genuinely changed how I think about health. So for my son, myself and my whole family, Taylor Reed Williams is a women's health and fitness coach, and she co-leads the Axion Collective. It's a private coaching community helping both men and women optimize their health through peptides, hormones, and smart training. Hunter Williams is one of the most respected voices in the biohacking and peptide space. His podcast has over 370 episodes, and he goes deeper on this peptide space than anyone that I've found. Together, they coach individuals and couples through comprehensive health optimization. And full disclosure, I'm a member of their Axion community, and their weekly Ask Me Anythings AMAs have been a game changer for me and for my family. So Taylor, for the people who are not familiar with you two, tell us about Axion and what you're building together.
So the Axion Collective, we really wanted us to be a space where people can come and learn no matter wherever the stage you're at in your health and wellness journey, and understanding peptides and fat loss, hormone replacement therapy is also a very big key into our group. And just being able to connect to like-minded people is also what we wanted to have a space for everybody as well, just because it is a very niche area. And a lot of times we don't have a lot of people in our everyday personal in-person life that understands the lifestyle. And we really just wanted to be able to have a space where we can really help guide people. And there's a lot of amazing other educators in the group that really help teach one another and really help, just to spread the word and to spread the awareness and the education behind peptides and behind hormones and fitness and wellness.
Yeah, I love that. Hunter, same question from your side. So what drives the work that you do?
Yeah, I think for us, one, when you coach people, like when you're first starting off, like years ago, you work with people one-on-one, and then it gets to the point, like luckily, if you're good at what you do, you end up having way more people that want to coach with you than you have time. And I think one of the best ways to help people at scale is to have a group. I also think the kind of the nature of the future of the internet is being in communities. Obviously, people like us, Nadia, you, and a lot of the other members in the group, just linking up with you guys. Selfishly for me, we have the group, and it's kind of a group coaching platform where we help people, like Taylor said, with peptides and hormones and stuff. But selfishly for us, it's actually one of the best things to help inform us of what people are struggling with and what content to create. So the reason I always say, the only reason my content, anyone likes it, is just because I have done a good job of getting feedback from people and understanding what they have problems with. But more so than that, the benefit that when I started a group, I never really thought of, that has really become to be the biggest blessing in it, is to have all the other people in there and actually learning from them. So selfishly for me, I learn more than I teach, I know for sure, in the group, just because there's a lot of other great minds, but then we get a lot of feedback from people. But I think going forward in the future, we're all kind of in this fringe health space area. Mm-hmm. And it's very important that birds of a feather flock together in this space, not only for things that may happen in the regulatory environment, but just for knowledge. So much of the information we talk about in the peptide world is advancing at such a rapid pace. And the closer we can stick together and kind of give feedback on what's working and what's not working, I think that's really important to do. So yes, it is a group coaching that people pay a membership fee for. But I think my intent behind it is to give people at least 10 times the value that they pay for it. And then hopefully too, they get to meet not only us, but then the other people like yourself in the group and build lasting relationships. And some of the, best friends and relationships and, industry partnerships we've had have come through our group, and then other groups we've been in ourselves. So really it's just at the end of the day, it's to help people and get this information out there, because the stuff we're going to talk about today is very fringe. And in our world, we kind of default to like, hey, this is just normal to know all this about
Yeah.
peptides, but it's still like Taylor and I have to remind ourselves all the time. It's still such a small fraction of people even know what a peptide is, let alone can get into the nuances of how to actually solve problems with them. So that's the intent. And, just build brick by brick, one day at a time. And hopefully in the future, it just keeps getting bigger.
It really is. It really is fringe, and it shouldn't be. It really should not at all, which is one of the main reasons why I have you guys on this podcast. You've been very generous with your time and your knowledge within the group. But the friends of this show are going to be people with autism, adults and kids, but also the people who love them, they're caregivers. And we're going to do something a little different today. So we're going to divide this podcast into two parts. The first part, we're going to focus on what's possible for people with autism. And then the second part, we're going to talk about the caregivers, right? Because when you feel better, you show up better, and there's a lot of demand on caregivers physically. And, so let's dive in. But just before we dive in, unfortunately, like you said, it's kind of French. So we're going to have a little disclaimer here. So before we dive in, I want to say something important. Nothing we discuss today is medical advice. Hunter and Taylor are educators and coaches. They're not your doctor, and definitely neither am I. Especially when we talk about children, please work with a qualified practitioner before trying anything you hear on this show. This conversation is about education and awareness, giving you the language and the questions to bring to your child's care team. Okay, with that said, let's get into it. So before we go deep, for the person listening who has never heard the word peptide before, I'm sure there's one or two that have never heard this word, but what are peptides? And also maybe let's touch on bioregulators. So what are peptides? What are bioregulators? And how do you explain that to someone who's brand new to the field?
Yeah, peptides, the easiest way to think about peptides are just chains of amino acids. So amino acids are kind of like the building blocks of life. And when you organize those in a certain sequence and just a chain where they're connected together, it's called a peptide. And that actually is kind of like a software on the body, or a signaling molecule on the body. So it's kind of an instruction for the body to do something. Our body is made up of probably hundreds of thousands, like more than we could count. And there's ones that we know about in the body. There's ones that we don't know about. There's also peptides that are man-made. So you can actually arrange amino acids in a certain sequence to create an event in the body. When we talk about peptides as the class, most people, when they hear about that, they think, like there's collagen peptides, right? Yes, those are peptides. We're talking about things that are a little bit different today. But the way I like to think of them is they're just signaling molecules for the body. Our body is made up of them. So a lot of the peptides, not all, but a lot of the peptides we'll probably talk about today are actually endogenously in our body. And we're actually just using synthetic versions of them to supplement, to create an effect in the body. So if the body is the hardware, peptides are kind of like the software that can go in and create certain outcomes in the body. Obviously, the delivery method for a lot of those are injections, but there's tons of other delivery methods as well, and we can talk about that too. But at the very root level, peptides don't have to be scary. They're all around us. They're inside of us, and we can actually use them for therapeutic effect to create a certain outcome in the body, just like a software program running on a computer does a certain function on that computer to kind of get you where you want to go.
I also like to always explain and use the example of what is a peptide as insulin. Everybody knows what insulin is, and insulin is a peptide essentially. So, I mean, it's just a peptide. There's just peptides that are made all sorts of different, but that's always a good example.
Yeah.
Is using insulin as an example.
Yeah. To the bioregulator point too, all bioregulators are peptides, but not all peptides are bioregulators. So all a bioregulator is a peptide that works on a specific organ in the body. So for instance, everyone knows or has heard of, like GLP-1 peptides.
Mhm.
Those are systemic peptides that work throughout the whole body. So they kind of create an effect on the whole body. Whereas a bioregulator peptide is going to be to one organ. So there's a bioregulator for the kidneys, for the heart, for the brain, for the prostate, for the liver. And so there's all these different bioregulators that we have that are actually peptides that will go in and specifically send signals to that organ tissue to create usually a really good healing effect on those specific organs.
Got it. Oh, that's a great way of explaining it. So peptides are the software to our hardware and signals, and bioregulators are a type of peptides that focuses on specific organs.
Yep.
Is that about it? Okay. Awesome. See, not scary at all.
Yes.
Amazing. So this is great. Thank you guys. So now let me just tell you, Hunter, you had an episode on P21, and what you said there kind of stopped me in my tracks. And we've talked about this before. But you said that you first learned about this peptide from parents of neurodivergent children who were seeing real changes. Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of the story behind it? If you can, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the biggest blessings of creating content is that when you put info out into the world and you get people that follow you, I actually, like I said, I learn more from the people that I follow than they learn from me, because you get all these clues or rabbit holes or things that you would have never known otherwise. Yeah. And I got an email one day from a parent with an autistic child, and they're like, "Hey, love your content. You should really check out this peptide called P21. I've been giving it to, I think, like my 8 or 9-year-old son, and it's helped with like 80-90% of their autism symptoms." And I was like, that's interesting. I had never even heard of the peptide P21 at that time, but I was like, let me start digging around. And so found some like really cool information around it, just in like rodent models. To my knowledge, I don't think it's been studied in humans yet, other than obviously like in the research world with all of us. But that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of like, okay, what would this be? And there were a few peptide companies selling at the time. So just got some, and there was no real like dosing parameters around it. We got some. And the good thing about peptides is, for the most part, the ones that are going to be commercially available are pretty safe within a certain range. And so the good thing is like a lot of peptides, not all, caveat, but a lot of peptides, you could take the whole bottle in one injection, or, in nasal spray or whatever. And the worst case is going to be you get nauseous, you have an upset stomach or something like that, because again, they're amino acids. So the body just breaks them down and then excretes them as waste. And so started looking into it, and I was like, wow, this seems pretty interesting based on the mechanism of action. It actually kind of works as a modulator of brain function. And so for people that have had brain trauma or strokes or things like that, it actually goes in the brain and specifically works to help heal some of the inflammation in the brain. But what's interesting is with autism and doing that process of like healing inflammation in the brain is actually modulating neurotransmitters. And so I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on autism. Nadia was way more advanced than me in that realm. But for what I could surmise in terms of how it was helping modulate neurotransmitters. So maybe dopamine was too high or too low, serotonin was too high or too low. It's helping modulate those by healing inflammation or healing some of the pathways that may be expressing towards inflammation. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Obviously, I tried it on myself. It's not really like a nootropic peptide, so you don't feel like you're on modafinil or, even something like that, or Adderall. It just really helps to heal inflammation in the brain, which all of us suffer from, right? Yeah. And some people are just normally low dopamine or high dopamine, or low serotonin, high serotonin. It kind of helps do that in a pathway that's very different from a pharmaceutical, because again, it's a peptide that's working to do that. So yeah, one day got a random email, went down the rabbit hole, started trying myself, and we've gotten really good feedback from other people that have tried it as well.
It's one of my favorite peptides to use. And for me, like, I grew up labeled with ADD, dyslexia. And so for me, like, because of my brain is wired differently, it works differently from, most people. I think that it helps me a lot with being able to actually like perform better when I have to actually sit at my desk and do work and doing research. My brain cognition is just so much sharper. And for me too, it's made a big difference with anxiety, especially anxiety dealing with work and juggling work and juggling home life balance. So I think we'll get into this more. I think even as a caretaker for children or for others that have autism, like for the caretaker, this could be even a great peptide for the caretaker to use. So I just can't say enough good things about it, and just how much I've seen the impact that it's helped me with the way that my brain wiring is different when it comes to being able to sit down and get structured work done.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, by the way, because by the way, the reasons that I love listening to you guys and working with you guys is because you do try these compounds. It's not theoretical. You actually try them, and both of you have different biologies, different needs. And so it's been super helpful for me to ask because, for example, for P21, to try it on Jimmy, before I tried it on Jimmy, I did ask Taylor, hey, but did it make you anxious, right? Because sometimes compounds that help the brain produce more or be more efficient can be also can cause anxiety, right? So thank you for sharing that. That was actually super, super helpful. And let's talk a little bit more then about the peptides are most relevant for brain health and neurological optimization. And if you guys could walk us through the ones that you think matter most, like Cerebrolysin, we spoke about P21, anything else that you can put in that category?
Yeah, I would say Cerebrolysin, for people who don't know, is actually, it's kind of a mix of peptides derived actually from pig brains. And before people get scared, that's like a very common thing. Most people are familiar with supplementing with like desiccated organ extract. A lot of companies sell supplements of, beef liver or things like that, beef heart, and that's getting very popular. So Cerebrolysin is derived from those just because pigs actually have like a very similar chemical makeup and some of the organs that we do. So that's where Cerebrolysin comes from. Fun fact about Cerebrolysin, at least I've heard this from another professional in the industry, in Eastern Europe, in many of the Baltic states, which is where Cerebrolysin originally came from and was originated from. Most of these peptides, a lot of times, came out of Russia and have been used back, going back 60 or 70 years. But on ambulances in Eastern Europe, they actually keep Cerebrolysin to administer intravenously to people that have a stroke or traumatic brain injury. And the reason is it's so powerful at healing inflammation in those first 24 to 48 hours for someone that experiences a traumatic event to the brain, to where you lose oxygen and lose blood flow to the brain. It's so powerful at helping reduce that they keep it on ambulances to administer IV to people to get to them right away. Whereas here in the United States, it's like, you can find it if you know what you're doing, but it's kind of hard to find. You definitely can't get it from most doctors here in the United States. So in terms of hierarchy, I would say Cerebrolysin is absolutely, that's like the gold standard jackhammer, sledgehammer of brain peptides. But a lot of people don't actually need that. I'm not a fan of using it all the time. I think there's a use case for it. Absolutely. Especially for someone with like early onset dementia or Alzheimer's, even potentially people that are autistic or neurodivergent. I think it'd be very beneficial in those cases. It just is one that it's kind of, the top tier, like mega influence that's going to create a pretty powerful cascade. And the reason I say that is a lot of people that just might have like some brain fog here or there, they're like, well, I need to take Cerebrolysin. It's not that it would be bad for them. I just don't think that they always need to go that high. It's kind of like going, if you need a car, you're going to get a Rolls Royce. It's like, before you do that, it's like, well, if I have a car, like, is it okay if I have like a Ford or a Chevy to get me where I need to go? In a lot of cases it is. So don't want to discourage people from it, but it's also one of those ones, like, I tend to reserve that, even for people that are doing biohacking and longevity and everything, they probably only need like a short cycle once per year. It's not something that you would have to use all the time. Definitely, like, you could use it for 2 to 4 weeks and reap the benefits for at least a year or more after that. And then from there, so like Cerebrolysin would kind of be the top tier. Then we have like some secondary compounds that I think would be really good. And I think for most people would kind of get them where they need to go. P21, like we talked about, is a huge one. There's also really popular peptides, one called Cmax, another called C-Link. Cmax is kind of one that stimulates the brain to be more active. It's not like a stimulant or anything. And C-Lank is a little bit more of one that helps with relaxation and is more of an anxiolytic. And some people will use like one in the morning and one at night, or they can use them together to kind of create like a calm focus. So those are good. I will say their effects are a little less pronounced. So it's not going to be something, again, that's like Adderall or anything like that, to where you just turn into the supercomputer. But it's really good for just kind of helping with boosting a little bit of focus, helping like modulate neurotransmission, and kind of giving you like a cognitive edge that would help eliminate brain fog. There's also one that's pretty interesting that I've been trying lately. It's called PE2228. And that one is actually better at modulating serotonin levels. So whereas a lot of people will be depressed and they get prescribed an SSRI, which can have pretty catastrophic consequences for some people, because neurochemistry, everyone's neurochemistry is a little bit different. P2228 naturally enhances the body's ability to modulate serotonin. So if someone is low serotonin, it'll actually modulate it rather than blocking and then flooding the receptors in a lot of cases like an SSRI will. So that's one that's a little bit more of like an antidepressant peptide, but again, not going to have some of the more like cataclysmic consequences of an SSRI or a lot of the other pharmaceutical drugs that are out there. And then lastly, there's one that I think fewer people know about. We talked about bioregulators. Yeah. There's one called cortigen, which is actually the bioregulator for the brain. And again, for someone that is relatively healthy and feels like their brain is firing fine, they might not notice anything from it. But for someone that's had a brain injury, a stroke, or even people that have brain fog, or in cases of someone being neurodivergent, it's going to help modulate tissue in the brain to express towards a more youthful, healthy state. And I've seen cortigen work really well there. So those are the ones. Obviously, there's like a whole ton of different ones we could get into. I would say for me, those are more of the major players that I see move the needle for most people.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's, by the way, that's a lot of options that for sure most of our audience will never have heard of, so this is hope. This is huge. So thank you for sharing that. So Taylor, if you had someone come to you with, caring for someone with autism, and they had the same question that Hunter just answered, practically, like, what would it look like? Like, what would you advise them to do? Like, would they start with nasal sprays, or would the lightest one
So
first?
I would advise, like, obviously, like, it's always going to be what the client is the most comfortable with delivery method wise, whether it's with a nasal spray, an injection, or sometimes there's an oral availability, and defining that. And I think that when we're talking about the brain and neurological, I think that nasal spray delivery method is going to be a really great option because it's going to get to the brain faster. Injections are always going to be good too, but I think that there are some benefits that we see. More people are going to be more comfortable using, I think, a nasal spray delivery method versus an injection. So I say, it's always baby steps, and we can always add and take our time with things. So I would say, starting off, and even give an example of some of the peptides that Hunter mentioned, depending on the client, like, I think starting off with more so baby steps. So I would definitely start off maybe using like a C-Lank or a C-Max, depending on, what the case is. If they're needing more for like helping with focus and also like calming effects from anxiety, I think can be great. And then kind of working our way up into having like, our P21 being our next advancement into a peptide. And then really like, bringing up Cerebrolysin. It's a really great peptide, but it's really, I think that needs to be kind of like the last stepping stone to try, because I think you can get some really great improvements with some of these other peptides before jumping into it. And then, somebody's really uncomfortable with a nasal spray, then, we have the option of trying the bioregulators, because those are oral capsules. And, there can be some great success with that as well too. Yeah. But I think it's important to also, really communicate and really have good communication between the client and the coach on what they really are comfortable with, because we want it to be successful, and we want the client to feel comfortable, and that and make a safe environment for them to feel comfortable to express how they feel about it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Taylor, because I'm sure that a lot of people are going to hear this and get super overwhelmed. Don't be overwhelmed.
Yes.
There are ways to start slowly. Start slow and you'll see progress. And there's a way to kind of get there in a way that's not as scary. Maybe you don't need to start with an injection. You can start baby steps. So I think that that's really great. Thank you for that. And we spoke about brain health, but how about neuroinflammation? So many people in our community are dealing with chronic inflammation of the brain, including my son, Jimmy. We actually did PET scans at the Amen Clinic, and it's right there, graphically, very scary stuff. And it shows up sometimes as brain fog, sensory issues, but also aggression and sometimes regression. So where do peptides fit in addressing that specific root cause?
Yeah, inflammation is huge. And I think there's, categories of peptides that really address inflammation. Some of the more common ones people have probably heard of are like BPC 157 and TB 500. Those are great for inflammation, not only if you have like an injury or if you have leaky gut or something like that, but also for the brain too. So those are pretty simple ones that, again, most people can get started with. Most of the time, those are going to do better as injections. You can get them orally, but to actually get like a systemic effect on the brain, you're probably going to want to inject. There's one lesser known peptide that's actually a neuropeptide that I've seen do really well for inflammation in the brain. And it actually can be used as a nasal spray. And that peptide is called VIP. It's known as vasoactive intestinal peptide. And it was actually kind of got popular during COVID. A lot of people are using that because it really helps open up lung tissue, because there's a lot of VIP actually in our lungs. And when you supplement with it, either through a nasal spray or an injection, it does really well to heal lung tissue. But a lot of people don't realize how powerful it is at actually modulating inflammation in the brain. So it's more or less a peptide that brings down inflammation, but specifically one that helps bring down inflammation in the brain. So BPC 157 and TB 500 are great for overall systemic inflammation. Ironically for me, the world I come from, I was a Division I college football player, wanted to go to the NFL and all this stuff. Ended up not making it, but I had tons of concussions. I played football from the age of 7 until I was 23 years old. And when I played, concussions were kind of just like you got your bell rung. It wasn't a thing where there's like more protocols around it. But it's interesting for me. I kind of went down this whole entire alternative health rabbit hole because I just wasn't feeling good. I had depression, I had anxiety, found I had a hormone deficiency, and I addressed that, and then kind of got into the world of peptides. Ironically for me, the first times that I took BPC 157 and TB 500, for the first 2 weeks, I had this immediate cognitive clarity that most people just don't report when they take those. Most people use them for injuries. But for me, like the first couple of weeks, I was like, man, I feel so much less. I didn't think that I had brain fog, but I had so much more mental clarity that I know was probably residual inflammation from lots of concussions. The thing about concussions is you can have one concussion, but the effects can linger for years. And in a lot of cases, the inflammation can build up over time. That's why you see a lot of former football players, they're fine actually for, a couple decades after they get done playing. And then in their 50s and 60s, it starts to manifest in terms of dementia or Alzheimer's, because it's kind of the residual buildup of some of the inflammation they had from trauma when they were younger. But just to that point for brain inflammation, I think it's one of those things, even just BPC 157 and TB 500 can be really good for helping quell some of the inflammation in the brain.
Yeah, that's amazing. And frankly, a little bit sad that you had to discover it this way. I wish I'm picturing you as a kid and someone coming to you and saying, hey, do this now. That would have been so amazing. Hopefully someone is listening to this. And we'll take action.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame for a lot of kids that grow up playing contact sports, football, soccer, hockey, a lot of these contact sports we don't realize what that's actually doing to a child's brain. And again, I wouldn't change for what I did with the world. I always tell people, if someone gave me a piece of paper to go play football right now, I'd probably do it because that's how much I loved playing football. And I know, knowing that it's not good for me. But that being said, we can at the very least give our kids a chance using peptides if they're going to play sports. You know, when Taylor and I have kids, hopefully in the very near future, that's one thing that we talk about. Like, are our kids going to play contact sports? And then also too, what's the strategy? Because, you know, back when I was growing up, these things were, you know, not even fringe. They just didn't really exist for people to access. And so to be able to do that and give kids, again, whether it's neurodivergent kids or kids that play sports that need help with repair from, you know, head trauma that they might go through in their sport, you know, that's something that I think, again, to go back to the community of doing this, that we can help kind of move forward is helping people with that and their children.
Oh yeah. I'm sure this is going to touch a lot of people. Honestly, it's, again, life-changing. So yeah, absolutely. But you touched a little bit also on this. Can we talk about anxiety? Of course, we're talking about people with autism, but Taylor, like you said, it's everyone. A caretaker will have a lot of anxiety. We all have a lot of anxiety because our lives are stressful. We're trying to be very productive and get a lot done. And as soon as we get things done, we want to do some more. So anxiety is just part of our lives. So of course, it's huge for, you know, our community. But what are the peptides that you're seeing? And I know we spoke a lot about it in the Axion community, but what peptides are you seeing work specifically for anxiety? You know, I know you spoke a little bit about Selenk, maybe oxytocin. What else? Anything you can think of for anxiety would be amazing.
Yeah. Oxytocin is a big one that can really help a lot with anxiety. And I think it can be beneficial for the caregiver and for the person with autism, because one of the things that, you know, it can help with empathy, and having that oxytocin in there as a tool can really help with socialization, especially like when it comes to people with autism, because that tends to be a very common theme for a lot of people with autism. Like, socialization is hard for a lot of them. And even for like the caretaker of like being the person being the caretaker, you're always doing for others. And even when you're not doing for others, you're feeling guilty that you're not doing for others when you're not doing it. So I think that oxytocin is one of the best peptides there is to help with anxiety. And what's really great about oxytocin, and it's like how I like my women to keep it, I tell them, like, you know, oxytocin in a nasal spray form is so good because you can kind of take it with you and you can use it as you need. Like, if you take it in the morning, you know, before you start your day, like if you wake up feeling anxious and you take it in the morning, and then you notice, like, you know, okay, like I'm feeling calm, but then you notice like, oh, it's 3:00 in the afternoon, 4:00 in the afternoon now, like end of the day wind down, and you know, you have like, you know, either like a carpool duty to do and housekeeping stuff now to do. Now you have to get dinner going, and you have like extracurricular activities you have to get, you know, other people to, like, that can kind of spike that anxiety, kind of come back up. So I think oxytocin is great because you can keep that in the nasal spray and you can use it again later in the day. And I think that it can also be beneficial for sleep too, to help like with really calming the nervous system and calming the mind and really getting your, you know, you relax before going into bed and going into your sleep realm. So I love oxytocin. Big fan.
And you use it as a nasal spray, right, Taylor? That's your favorite spray?
I do. I like it as a nasal spray. I have used it as an injection, and the injection is really good as well too. But there is something about it in a nasal spray form. I like that better when it comes to anxiety and like that really the mind chatter that I know as women, a lot of us struggle with that. And I think it's just nice to not have to inject something all the time. Yeah. It's nice to just be able to have it in a spray, and it's a lot easier to use. And it's a lot easier to carry it around with you that way too.
Yeah. And just before we jump on to the next one, Taylor, if you could maybe share, remember we were talking about using oxytocin when you're about to walk into a social event. And again, that could be for someone with autism, but also for caregivers that are not really in the mood to socialize, frankly, but they have to.
Yeah. So it is a great, I think for somebody like me, and I think we all have anxiety. We all struggle with it, no matter who you are at some point in your life. But I know for me, sometimes socializing, especially when you work from home, and a lot of times I'm filming behind a camera, so I'm talking to people behind a camera all day. And then sometimes if I'm going somewhere new socializing, or if I'm going to be around an event where I know there's going to be a lot of drinking, but I still have to go to this social event. And Hunter and I, we don't drink. And sometimes being in that environment sometimes is a little bit more of a struggle for me, just because when you go to those events and people judge, you almost feel like, the black sheep in the crowd because you're not drinking. Just to use that as an example, it can really help, just it calms me down to be prepared to go in that environment. Or even if it's let's be honest, a holiday event and you got the whole family together. And if, we both come from families where there's a lot of women in our families that are the matriarchs that want to control everything. My mom's Italian, so it's, it can be a lot to go into that environment around the holidays.
You're welcome.
And just having that can be you can just go into that social environment and you just feel more calm and more secure with yourself, to where you become more open, and you're just able to kind of if someone's being obnoxious, you cut it off, and it can bring you out of your shell as well too. So there's definitely times that I've used it in settings with meeting new people, especially if I'm going somewhere new by myself and not knowing anybody. It definitely makes it a little bit more easier for me to not be so shy and open up and to communicate with people.
That's amazing. Thank you, Taylor. Really, you have no idea how helpful that is, because now everybody can picture how it feels, and with no side effects, right? It just feels good, but it doesn't numb you out, doesn't make you tired, and just an amazing tool. Why not? Hunter, anything else that you can think of for anxiety? Specifically, you spoke about Selenk.
Yeah, Selenk is great. I think P21 I've seen help some people with anxiety as well. The interesting part about oxytocin too is, I forget where I read this, but there is a published study that oxytocin was used in autistic children as a nasal spray, and it actually increased their own body's production of oxytocin.
Really?
A lot of times people think that, okay, if I take oxytocin, is there going to be a shutdown of what my body's making since I'm introducing it? And actually, ironically, we see this with some peptides. You wouldn't expect this. Sometimes peptides actually increase what the body's already doing, because it increases the number of receptors to which it's doing it. So interestingly, I don't think there's any downside whatsoever to taking oxytocin. The only thing I would add that isn't really a peptide, but I think a lot of people kind of overlook, there's actually two. One is L-theanine. So L-theanine is just an amino acid, again, that you can buy either in a liquid form or a capsule form. Yeah. If you take 200 to 400 milligrams of L-theanine, it actually is very hard to be anxious. I'm not saying it's going to solve anxiety, but at least in a short window, it can be very, very beneficial. And then also too, I'm a really big fan of magnesium, and most people are deficient in magnesium anyway. So a lot of people, we usually need 3 times more magnesium than we even think that we're taking anyway. But I'm a huge fan of taking magnesium at night, but then also you could use it on demand. If, like Taylor said, you're going to be in a situation, it kind of just helps relax the nervous system. It does a ton of things in the body, but not really peptides. Yeah. But if you took some oxytocin and then threw in a little bit of L-theanine and some magnesium, you will be very calm. Again, it's one of those things. It's kind of like a manual force or lever that you can pull, if you're in an anxious situation, to really help with that. And again, is that going to solve the nature of anxiety? No, I think in a lot of cases, people will get into like the spiritual nature of anxiety. Sure, I admit that is as big of any, a problem as anything, but there is a neurochemical aspect to anxiety. In a lot of cases, it could be inflammation driven. It could be gut health driven. It could be a combo of the situation plus the inflammation in the brain. And I think those, at least like short term, could help in certain situations. And then from long-term use, you do see improvements over time. And a lot of people that will use those like, on a regular basis, whether that's 4 to 5 times a week or not. So
yeah. I love that you brought up L-theanine, because I was thinking that it's like we're communicating through our minds. And Nadia knows how much I talk about L-theanine in the group. And I think that liquid L-theanine is been one of the greatest discoveries for myself with anxiety. And I always tell people that, especially if you have a hard time staying asleep and you're somebody who gets the mind chatter at night, keeping liquid L-theanine by your bedside table, like take some of it before you go to bed. And then when you wake up in the middle of the night, take some more. It only lasts around like 4 hours in the body. So that's also what's really good. It's funny because I had a family member who used L-theanine and would put it into soda water and use it as a mocktail to help them decompress after a long day. Perfect. And it made the biggest difference. And it's funny because she used it, she did it to her husband. And it was so funny. He got done with his little mocktail and he's like, oh, I feel better now. Like I didn't need alcohol. So I
thought the story was that he thought it was alcohol and he felt the effects from it, but it wasn't really alcohol.
That was,
or maybe I made, was that what happened?
That was a different family member.
Oh, okay.
You have to do that. Sometimes you have to use what I call the proof of concept strategy with husbands. Yeah. First to prove the concept and then they're convinced. So
yeah.
Yes. No, but that's awesome because actually I was going to talk about sleep next, but I love, Taylor, that you spoke about L-theanine, having it on your nightstand in a liquid form for that 3-4 a.m. wake up, which a lot of people deal with, unfortunately. And I'm guessing if it's liquid, then you're going to absorb it much faster and it's going to put you back to sleep much faster. Anything else for sleep? That you guys, and I know both of you, again, are different biologies, right? So you've tried so many things, and we spoke about magnesium, but anything else you could recommend for sleep?
The other, it's actually another peptide that I would recommend. It's called DSEP, and it's deep sleep inducing peptide. And that is a great peptide. It doesn't necessarily help you fall asleep. It just keeps you in your deep sleep realm longer. But I think that and Hunter, you'll be able to speak on this more, but there's actually some neurological benefits that DSEP can work on, not even just for sleep, that you recently discovered also too.
Well, yeah, it's funny. It actually goes back to the 1980s, but DSEP was originally discovered and synthesized for opioid withdrawal. So it actually was given to people in the 80s to help them coming off drug, like an opiate addiction, to which they have severe withdrawal, to which in some cases they can die from it. But it actually, I've seen that practically work in cases from people that I've known that have coached other people. And so in addition to helping sleep better, again, it's not going to knock you out like Ambien, but it will. What's really cool about it is that it's more of a circadian rhythm orchestrator. So it helps to go in and modulate circadian rhythm to kind of sync up the body with like, okay, during these hours, my brain needs to be in deep sleep mode. And then if, again, you're responsible at like hopefully getting to bed at a decent time, waking up at a decent time, because that's important too. It works really well to help do that. So DSEP is great. I think a lot of people get it thinking that, oh man, this is just going to be like a peptide version of Ambien. And that's not the case. If there's something that is lacking in the body, again, like a hormone deficiency or a mineral deficiency, it's not going to fix that. However, if you're doing everything right, it's going to help. Even for us, Taylor and I were, pretty, anal retentive when it comes to health stuff. Even we notice we sleep deeper given everything that we do to help improve our sleep. So I like DSEP. Another class that people don't typically associate with sleep, but could really help, especially I think in the case of caretakers would be growth hormone peptides. And there's ones like tesamorelin, ipamorelin, CJC1295 is another one. Basically, what those do is they tell the brain and the pituitary gland to make more growth hormone. And the body naturally releases growth hormone typically around bedtime every night. And when our brain pulses that growth hormone, it helps us get into the proper sleep cycles that we want. The problem is when people after the age of 30, growth hormone declines by about 15% per decade. And so you have someone that's maybe in their 40s and 50s, they may have next to no growth hormone being pulsed from their brain, which a lot of times impacts their sleep rhythm. And so if we can use a peptide to restore that, like one of those peptides I mentioned, a lot of cases, even though that's not the intended use for most people with those peptides, a lot of people will use them to build muscle or burn fat or improve their skin or hair or whatever. It can dramatically improve sleep architecture, which again is not necessarily like knocking you out like Ambien, but helping with the phases of sleep and making sure that if you're sleeping hopefully 7 to 8 hours a night, that you're kind of hitting, because some people can sleep 7 to 8 hours and they get zero deep sleep or very little deep sleep, where some of these things can take that and help improve the architecture of the sleep to like you're actually getting the restful sleep that you need to make it through the next day.
I think another growth hormone releasing peptide is kind of more so like a small molecule for someone who wouldn't want to have to inject. It's a newer molecule. It hasn't had a ton of study done on it. It's called MK777. And what's nice about MK77 is that it comes in an oral form. So you can get it either in a capsule or in a liquid tincture, which is another great option for somebody who doesn't want to inject a growth hormone releasing peptide. And you'll get amazing sleep benefits with that small molecule.
That's amazing. And you guys, just to be sure, these are not growth hormones. These are growth hormone agonists, right? So just for everybody
so it
listening,
helps your body produce its own natural growth hormone. You're not supplementing with growth hormones.
Absolutely amazing. And by the way, so people who are listening, I think there's going to be, I'm seeing it already. There's going to be two groups of people. There's going to be people like me who are going to be like, all right, I want to do all of them. I just want all of them. I'm going to implement all of them. And then you'll have others who are going to be very nervous, maybe a bit intimidated and overwhelmed. So for both of these types of people, I'm sure the starting point is going to be the same. But practically, like, what would you recommend for them? Step 1, step 2, step 3. And of course, you have a ton of content on both your YouTube channel and your podcast, which we're going to put in the show notes so people can go much, much, much deeper into all of this. And of course, the Axion community. But again, practically, how could our listeners, for their kids, and we'll talk about the caregivers, but for the people that are caring for kids or adults with autism, what would be the first 3 steps?
I would say let's the first step, because it all of it can be very overwhelming, and it's like, I want to try everything. And then when you're presented with like all these different options, you get stuck and you're like, I'm just not going to make any decision. So I think that most importantly, let's focus on like, what is the goal here? What is the most important thing to address? Is it anxiety? Is it sleep? Is it brain cognition? Is it, what thing is the most important? Let's work on that pathway, see how we do with that. And then that's when we can go in and add in our next section. And I kind of like to put it like more so like put it as like steps, as like your number 1 problem, number 2, 3, 4. And we just work our way down, because if you go in and you add all of these molecules in at once, you're not going to know what's working. And you're not going to know, like, if you have if you're a non-response to something, you're not going to know what it is if you're trying 5 things at once. So it's like always trying to focus on what the main goal is, add one thing in at a time, and then work into that step.
Yeah, I like to tell people, think of it, for lack of a better way to say it, what is your bleeding neck problem? And so if you had a bleeding neck, obviously you probably wouldn't care if you're overweight. You probably wouldn't care if you have a toenail fungus. You would care about stopping the bleeding there. And contrary to like what a lot of people would think, like Taylor and I talk a lot of peptides, like, oh man, you must be taking 30 peptides a day. We actually don't. I've experimented on myself and worked with a ton of different people across using a ton of different peptides.
Yeah.
But actually,
especially right now.
Yeah, we do the same thing right now. Fertility is our biggest goal. So like we have, a handful of peptides that we're using for that goal of fertility, and we're good. We don't have to use 30 different things, nor would I want to, because that's kind of my focus. And I want everything that I'm doing to be oriented to that. So whether someone wants to do all of them or just start with one, I would ask myself, like, look in the mirror and say, hey, what's my bleeding neck problem? Maybe for someone that's anxiety. Maybe for someone it's inflammation in the brain. Maybe for someone that's gut health and addressing gut health. So I would say, what's the main issue there? And then, okay, now let's match the peptides that we're going to choose to that. And in a lot of cases, that might be one, maybe two peptides. And you could start with those one or two. The reason, even if there was other ones that you wanted to throw in, you're not going to be able to create a really good feedback loop within yourself to understand, okay, this worked or this didn't work. And maybe the peptide that you choose for whatever issue that you're trying to heal doesn't work. And that's okay. I mean, most peptides are going to have some effect, but it might not heal it all the way. And that's totally okay. That's a signal to the body of, hey, maybe to address this one specific area, but there's some room to kind of move to the next area that needs to be healed. So whether someone wants to try all of them, again, I've tried, lots of different peptides in my life. If there's one person out there, it's probably Taylor and I that's experimented with it. But at the same time, I don't necessarily long-term, it's not a good idea to just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. You really want to focus on what's my goal? What can I use to achieve that goal? Let's spend the next 2 to 3 months working towards that, see where I'm at. And if I'm good, great, then I can move on to the next thing. Or if I need to stay back and evaluate what's going on, what can I change? What can I improve? But I don't want people to feel overwhelmed because, again, someone could start, let's say anxiety is their issue. Someone could start with the most simple thing in the world, which is just take some nasal spray of oxytocin a few times a week and see how it does. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, or maybe you need more, higher of a dose or whatnot. But until you actually kind of start creating a little scientific experiment on yourself, when you're looking at like, okay, I'm using this to achieve this, either it works or it doesn't, it's very hard to just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and again, see what sticks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. And especially when it's for someone you're caring for, right? Because that feedback loop is a little bit harder because a lot of these kids with autism are not verbal or they don't feel things the same way that we do, right? So it's really hard to understand. It's going to be based on just observation. So I love that you have to kind of isolate things and do things one at a time and get your successes cumulatively versus in another way. So you guys, I'm going to share with the audience that, like I said, I am part of the Axion community with Taylor and Hunter. And every week we jump on those AMAs and I ask a million questions, not just for myself, for my son, Jimmy, and the rest of my family as well. And since I've worked with you guys and with your guidance, my weight has stabilized. I'm no longer insulin resistant. Yay, I was very much so. I'm on hormone replacement therapy and my energy is just so much better. And honestly, just to get back to what you guys were talking about, the hardest part has been not trying like everything at the same time because I'm more on that camp. So you two probably hear like a lot. So a lot of people, like I said, saying I want to do everything at the same time. And so when they come in like this, you said that you just basically tell them to slow down and do things just one at a time and learn. I think the first step is going to be learning. This is what I did. And that brings us to the second part of this podcast, which is going to be talking about caregivers. And again, before we start with that, again, a disclaimer and note, same disclaimer applies here. Talk to a doctor before starting hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, GLPs, or any of the strategies that we're going to be discussing here. So we're going to talk about the caregivers. And I don't just mean like self-care and like feeling good. I mean actual biological health. So Taylor, I know you see a lot of women and people that are burnt out, and I'm sure you see a lot of caregivers because unfortunately autism is very common now. It's very widespread. So they come to you exhausted, overweight, hormones completely wrecked, not sleeping. So can you tell us what you see, what their baseline is when they come to you? And I know you see a lot of also biohackers and athletes, but more on the caregiver side, people that never really took care of themselves because they're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the majority of the people I work with, I would say most of them are caregivers because the majority of the women that I work with are all moms. And
Yeah.
all moms are caregivers. And I think the baseline and the fundamentals of all of it, it really does start with hormones. Where are you at, like, with your hormones? And that's getting the proper blood work done, working with the right medical provider. This is like so key and so important. And is one of the biggest keys that it plays that is missing is like connecting with the right medical professional. And that's why people like me and Hunter exist, to be able to help people get connected with the right providers. But starting, hormones are your foundation, because you can take all the certain supplements, you can go to the gym, you can do all the journaling, you can do all the meditation and take all the peptides. But if your hormones are not where they need to be, that is the foundation. Like, none of it is going to work as well. And then once you get the hormones in checked and get them in line where they need to be feeling optimal for you as the individual, it makes it so much easier to show up as the caretaker, as the provider, like for the person that has autism. And you have to be able to care for yourself and put your health first. I like to use this as an example, is that when a woman is in labor, the most important thing to that doctor that comes first is the health of the mother. Yeah. That is what comes first. And that is where, like, I think that gets lost for a lot of women because of just our nature of being caretakers. And this goes for men too that are caretakers in this. I personally just work one-on-one with women. I coach some of the men in the group, but like in the group setting, like I work one-on-one directly only with women. So hormone replacement is a big one. And I think one of the key, all three hormones are important: your testosterone, your estradiol, and your progesterone. But one of the key things that I see, especially for caretakers, because it is a lot of weight, it's a lot of mental and emotional stress on the body, is that progesterone, especially if you're a caretaker struggling with sleep. Progesterone is like a game changer for caretakers. So I'd say, like, that's super important. Your testosterone is going to be important into how well you can, function and multitask. That's how I like to use examples of like pinpointing is, like testosterone. I like to use it as the hormone of like, how well can you multitask? Progesterone, how well are you struggling? Like, are you like regulating your nervous system and you're being able to deal with stress? And then your estradiol is more so how sharp is your mind and your brain cognition and how fast you can respond, is how I like to categorize the hormones. And then we also have thyroid. And I don't want to go so much into the rabbit hole down with the hormones, but the thyroid is super important because the thyroid is the powerhouse to your hormones, and to be able to make all these hormones also function properly. Also, thyroid is going to be super important for energy levels. And a lot of people don't realize that, is that you could also be on all of these like great hormone replacement therapy, but if you're not also optimizing your thyroid health, that can be a big one. And like how I like to explain, like using thyroid off as being an example, is like, if you find yourself being the person that has to get the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, you need that extra cup of coffee or that energy drink or that second boost, there's definitely something going on with the thyroid function. And that's going to play a big role on the nervous system. I see a lot of women coming to me, like that complain about, they used to have like really super thick, luscious hair, and now they notice their hair is falling out, their eyebrows are thinner. That's really going to be a thyroid function. So those are like the most important. And all of this, I keep explaining it as a terms of women, but this all applies to men as well too. So that's definitely like the foundation is starting off with the hormones.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, Hunter, that's true. Like men too, of course, are caregivers, and maybe in a different way. They wouldn't want to complain about their energy levels or their hormonal issues and all of that. So I'm sure that you also see parents that are completely run down men. And how would you also kind of take care of them?
Yeah, I think like Taylor said, the baseline is going to be hormone replacement therapy. I think the biggest thing for someone, because again, we know that like that might sound like a foreign concept to people. Hormone replacement therapy, what does that mean? Is that testosterone? I've heard of testosterone. I've heard of estrogen. I've heard of progesterone. One, it's kind of a complex thing, but I just want people to know there shouldn't be a stigma around replacing hormones. So many people think that they're damaged people or that something's wrong with them. We all require hormones to function properly. In the world we live in now, Taylor and I see a ton of people's blood work. We've worked with a ton of people through the years. It is very common for a man or a woman after the age of 30 to basically be destitute when it comes to their hormones.
Especially women after if they've had children. Because I've seen women that are under the age of 30 that have had several children. And I mean, I'm comparing it. That's the same comparison of blood work as I have a woman who's, 49 going through menopause.
So sad.
Yeah. And I think people have this stigma of like, well, like I can diet my way, I can exercise my way, I can supplement my way. And that's kind of like saying, if you put nicer tires on your car, if you put better paint on your car, if you put, better window tint on your car, it's going to make it go better. None of those things have to do with the gas in the tank. And if you don't have the gas in the tank, none of those other things that you're doing, whether you're trying to eat healthy, whether you're trying to exercise, whether you're doing your best to sleep properly, if you don't have the gas in the tank, those things are mostly going to go to waste because you have to replace the hormones. So like I always just tell people, like, get your blood work done first, because my experience at that point, it becomes real for a lot of people. And when they take the responsibility of getting it done themselves rather than doing it at a checkup with their doctor that's not going to check even any of those hormone markers to begin with, they'll just probably look at your cholesterol to put you on a statin rather than actually checking your testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. For most people, like you're going to make it real to understand like, oh man, I do have a clinical deficiency, or at least a deficiency that can be improved through supplementation. So I think the one thing that I would add to what Taylor said is hormones are the building blocks of life. Peptides are great. We can do a lot of improvement with peptides. I think specifically on the caretaker's side of thing, I know the healthiest people in the world that do everything to a T that don't have hormones, and they're still lacking and their blood work isn't great. Throw in someone that's cortisol is ramped up because they're stressed out all the time because they're in situations where they're taking care of everyone else but themselves. In my opinion, in almost all cases, that person is going to require hormone replacement therapy. And we don't have to talk about all that, like we have resources to help people get linked up with good doctors, but I just don't want people, I've seen so much firsthand of people having kind of like a self-shame that, man, I'm a defunct human now that my hormones don't. And that's not the case. Like Taylor and I both were in our 30s. I required hormones because I had concussions. My body didn't make testosterone. Yeah. So my testosterone was that of a 90-year-old man. And ever since I fixed that problem in my life has just changed for the better. So I think a lot of people kind of have the shame and stigma around hormones, or they're scared of them. And it doesn't have to be that way.
And there's nothing like, we were just talking about this, like there's no shame. There's no shame. It doesn't make you less of a woman. It doesn't make you less of a man for it.
Yeah, there's no shame. And I mean, you guys are a young couple that's very healthy, and you work out and you're very optimized, but yeah, you're still using hormone replacement therapy. There shouldn't be a shame. And then what comes after not being ashamed, frankly, is going to be advocating for yourself. You just have to advocate for yourself. If you don't feel good, you don't feel good. You just don't feel good. You don't have to justify not feeling good. You need to find help, and you start by helping yourself by advocating, understanding what the issues are, and like you guys said, hopefully finding a practitioner that can help, which I know is super hard, and I know you guys are working on this, so thank you for that, because that's huge, right? Because again, everybody's overwhelmed. I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed. The message is very simple. The baseline is going to be your hormones and your thyroid. And then you have all these amazing tools to layer on top of it, all these peptides and supplements, right? And I know a lot of people know about GLP-1s because everybody calls it Ozempic, but obviously there's a lot more to it. And there's also a lot of shame around using GLPs. I use it. You guys use them too. They're amazing. They're everywhere right now. We hear about Ozempic, semaglutide, tirzepatide, and retatrutide. But for a caregiver who's dealing with weight gain, which is most of us because of the cortisol issues, unfortunately, and metabolic issues. So what's your honest take on GLPs, and when do these make sense? But just like what we just said before now, when are they just a Band-Aid, until other things are taken care of?
Yeah, I would actually, the hot take that we would have is I think GLPs that we have right now are some of the best anti-aging / longevity molecules that exist. Now, to the person that's unaware, they would think like, well, how is a diabetes medication that most people would say that they, in parentheses or quotations, don't need, right, because, like they might not be diabetic or might need not lose 100 pounds or whatever. I actually think there's a use case of GLPs for every person walking the earth. And I would even go as far as to say in a lot of children's cases, not all children's cases, but in a lot of children's cases, they could benefit from them. I think GLPs, what we'll see is like in 10 to 20 years, we know them now as diabetic and weight loss drugs. They work amazing for that, but there's a lot of nuance around GLPs. If you look at aging is caused by inflammation. And inflammation a lot of times stems back to this insulin cycle in the body. And most people need to lose weight. They're like, oh, I've got to cut my carbs down. In some cases, that could be true. But in a lot of cases, there's a whole host of things going on there. A lot of it has to do with our hormones. A lot of it has to do with how well we produce insulin and how insulin sensitive we are. And if you look at GLPs, they're really winding the clock back to take our pancreas and all these other systems that rely on insulin signaling in the body, which is pretty much everything. And they're rewinding and almost reverse aging that system. And when you look at that, even for someone like us who doesn't people wouldn't look at us and say, we need to lose weight. We're pretty low body fat. We're exercise all the time. We're super active. We still use low doses of those because it improves everything in the body. It improves brain health. It improves inflammation, suppresses inflammation. It improves not only insulin signaling, but how well we respond to the training and exercise that we do. And so there's even studies now that are coming out that show GLPs shrink tumors. So they're literally anti-cancer because they create an environment in the body that is not favorable to cancer or tumor growth. And so I view GLPs, yes, of course, you want to have the foundational lifestyle things dialed in. Of course we do. And of course you want to resistance train. Of course you want to eat protein and take care of yourself and do all those things. But in a lot of cases, in the modern world we live in, that's not going to be enough. Sure, it would be great if everyone could work out for 2 hours a day and walk around and not be inside and do all those things that, thousands of years ago humans got to do and have processed or unprocessed organic food. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And what GLPs do, I think, is they help bridge the gap that modernity has created to make humans sick, and it reverses the clock on a lot of that damage that modernity has done to us. So of course they work well for helping people lose weight. But what I would say is that even people, I've seen a lot of people that take GLPs and they lose the weight and they think, okay, I can get off the shot now. I don't need the shot anymore. I would actually advise those people, there's a use case, obviously like dosage dependent, that Taylor and I, unless things change in the future, which I'm sure they will, plan to stay on those for life because of the longevity benefit. So I want people to, if I had one thing that I'd love to wave a magic wand, is to reverse frame how people understand GLPs. Is they're not these things that just diabetic people need or just obese people need. They're things that actually reverse age us because of what they're doing to the body. And then it becomes a question of like, okay, what's the right dose? Because we don't need super high doses. We can use very small doses to actually harness those benefits. And so I think right now especially like in the alternative health world, there's a lot of people that like to say negative things about GLPs or even have shame around them or criticize people for using them to lose weight. When I think it should be the exact opposite. I think, we should encourage everyone to be using GLPs as an adjunct to everything we're also doing from a healthy lifestyle standpoint.
I think also too, the amount of research that's now being done with GLPs with addiction and what it does for neurological brain portion of it is also really, really, really powerful and amazing.
Independent of weight loss, meaning like you don't even need to take it to lose weight, or you don't take a dose that's high enough to create weight loss or appetite suppression. Oh. Literally just a small enough dose to where you don't feel anything at all. You're still going to be getting some of these other benefits.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Because also it's a vicious cycle, right? Because if your weight is high, then it's going to cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of potentially neurological issues and metabolic issues. So really, it should be, yes, one of the baseline compounds that you use. And also I would encourage everybody, and I had to say that to my husband, but anyone that hears negative things about GLP-1s, don't stop at the title or the headlines. Like, listen to what they're saying. And I guarantee you, there's never going to be like a real deep reason for them to say not to use it. Really, there's no reason not to use it. And like you guys are saying, the research is now showing that it does so much more. And it's right, potentially because, like you were saying, glucose and metabolic issues are the root cause of most of our health issues. And again, as caregivers, you guys, longevity is not a luxury. It's really a necessity, because when we're not here, and it's not just about money, but who's going to take care of our kids, right? So working on your longevity and your health is necessary. It's really like that oxygen mask they have to put on your face first. And like you said, Taylor, as a parent in general anyways, right? You are caring for your kids. So thinking about longevity, taking care of your health is absolutely essential. So just before we go to protocols and how to build your protocol as a caregiver, you guys both spoke about workouts and training. And I know it's hard for most people. Again, anxiety, very busy, stress, all of that. So if our listeners only have 30 minutes a day, like let's call it 30 minutes a day, and they're very, very tired, their energy is completely depleted, which again, another vicious cycle. You're tired, so you don't want to work out. What would you recommend? What would their approach look like for training?
I would say, especially speaking for the women side of things, I would say, training, if you really only have, 30 minutes, I would say, do cardio. Even if it's just 30 minutes of just walking on a treadmill, on a stationary bike, walking outside. If you can, really making sure you're at least doing like 30 minutes of cardio. And I think even if it's just like 15 minutes of like a morning walk and 15 minutes of an evening walk at night after dinner can make a huge difference. And then, for women, look, I know going into a gym can be so intimidating for people. And I get it. Like, I used to be that person at one point in my life when I was in my early 20s, and I wasn't as in shape as I used to be. And I've been very different from how I look now. Like I remember feeling uncomfortable going back into a gym where I used to I weightlifted all through high school. Like I loved being in the weight room and then knowing that. So I can very much understand that feeling. But YouTube is a great tool. There's a lot of really great free exercising routines that you can do. Most people can, get like a yoga mat and do, a floor Pilates routine. If you're not somebody, we're big believers into going into the gym and really weightlifting is the key to longevity, is how Hunter and I practice and work with our clients. But I'm also not going to push that onto somebody, because I think as long as you're moving your body with cardio, doing some type of floor home Pilates routine can be just as beneficial, especially when we're talking about caregivers that have, maybe you're dealing with a little bit more inflammation, you're dealing with more higher stress levels, you don't have, the free time available to, to spend an hour in the gym, then, clock in like the 20-30 minute driving time that goes along with it. So I think like doing something very, very beginner level, very basic like that. I think also this is a more of an investment product, but the tonal gym is also another really good home gym. If you don't have a lot of space to have, bigger gym equipment, the tonal, it doesn't take up a ton of space. And I've had women get really, really great results with that. And again, you can do it in your own home, in your own privacy. And you can also do it around the caretaker schedule as well.
Yeah. And the whole family can use it. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And the whole family can use it, and it can be a really great way, even too, like for the person with autism to really get them, moving their body in a different way that they can be comfortable doing it in their own home.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you want to speak on the men?
Yeah, I think like Taylor said, it doesn't have to be complicated. I think people get really intimidated by the gym. I would tell people, if every day you could just get 30 minutes to an hour of walking in, and maybe that's even if you have to put a treadmill where you're working at, or if you could get, like Taylor said, a morning walk and an evening walk, I would just tell someone to start there. If they're not someone that's exercising, start there. And a lot of times those issues that people are having, the stress, the anxiety, those issues, the fact that someone is not exercising is a lot of times partly responsible for the severity of those issues. And so the very fact, we're talking about the peptides and hormones and stuff, what we're talking about with exercise is just as important. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in a gym, like if you can go walking, at least get that much per day. And then if you get just a few little weights to have in your house, you can even just get little, like 5 or 10 pound dumbbells, just do some squats with those. Do, if you can, some assisted push-ups, and move the body. If you could get 20 to 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times per week of doing some of the resistance training, plus the walking or doing a cardio machine, whether it's like a treadmill or a bike. It doesn't have to be hard, but I'll just tell people in a lot of cases, avoiding those is going to be one of the main reasons you have the health issues you do. So again, it's the oxygen mask first. You got to take care of yourself. And again, for someone that's struggling first, the good thing about doing that, like if you can get a bike, most people can go on Facebook Marketplace and find a bike for free. A stationary bike, if you really want to, if it, cost is an issue, you can listen to a podcast like this. You can watch Netflix. There's ways to pass the time. When we do our cardio, I'm always reading a book. And so like, that's my reading time is when I'm doing cardio. And so it doesn't have to be intimidating. Obviously, yes, if you can get to a gym and do things at a gym, that's spectacular. But for someone that really has got a lot going on, is taking care of people outside of themselves, it's crucial to do those things in order to actually be able to show up and give the care that you need to.
Yeah.
Also, I would just to kind of like add in some like other little like kind of like biohacking tools. Like these are going to be, a little bit more of a luxury items that I'm going to share, but that can be very beneficial is obviously a vibration plate is also going to be really great because that's going to help with lymphatic drainage, and it's really going to help, especially for if you're the caretaker that has a lot of inflammation and, you know, you are overweight and like really movement in the body, like, you know, cardio can be challenging for you, you know, lifting weights is going to be a challenge for you. The vibration plate can be a really good, just like kind of stepping stool to really help with just getting lymphatic drainage. And it kind of feels like it's almost like getting like an adjustment done from the chiropractor in a way, is another really great tool. And then another really great tool is the Bimini oxidative tub. So it's essentially it is a machine that you put into your bathtub, and it puts oxygen water into the tub. So it actually pulls out some of the water from the tub, and it puts nano oxygen bubbles into the water, and it feeds it back into the tub. Now, this is again, more of a luxury item, but this could be a really good tool for somebody like with autism. Also great tool for the caretaker because the oxygen gets into the bloodstream faster. Very similar to using hyperbaric chamber, but hyperbaric chambers can be very intimidating, very scary, especially for people with autism to go into an enclosed claustrophobic space like that. Like I myself, I don't love doing them.
Well, they also have exploded,
and they've exploded. This is a very like safe tool. You put it into the tub. Do you have to sit in it longer? Yes. But I think even if like you were to just sit and do your feet, they've had some great results, even just having your feet soaking in it. And it helps with, you know, getting more oxygen into the blood system. That's also going to help a lot neurologically too with the brain as well.
Oh my God. Absolutely. So, and by the way, I've had hyperbaric chamber at home. So we're all about trying every single thing. So we'll definitely put that also in the show notes, because that sounds amazing. And I've never tried that before. Hunter, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great alternative to a hyperbaric. It's also usually you can get one of the devices for around $8,000 or $9,000. If you have a bathtub, you just set it outside the bathtub. Whereas an hyperbaric usually is going to be at least, you know, for most people, if you're getting like really nice one, it could be upwards of like $30,000 to get in a house. So we love that thing. The only regret I have about having it is not to be able to take like a 60-minute bath every day, because you do have to sit there
for at least 30.
Yeah, for at least 30
minutes. Like if you can do it for 60, you do feel a difference. Yeah. You do feel a difference at 60, but I mean, that's a lot of time to dedicate to it. I definitely have brought my laptop in there and work if it's while like I'm doing it.
Yeah, even if it's like 2 or 3 days a week, it still can be extremely
or like you said, the foot bath, or you know, something like that. That's absolutely
because the foot bath, you could literally just bring that to your desk or wherever like you're having to do like schoolwork or anything like that. You can bring that to you.
And by the way, little known fact, but you know, there are some things that a lot of people with autism have in common. One of the most common things, and now that I told you this, ask anyone with a kid with autism, they all love baths. They all love water, swimming. Yes, it's like one of those things where every single person on the spectrum just absolutely adores swimming and bathtubs. So I'm sure it's not going to be hard to
two birds with one stone.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh yeah, totally.
And where the people that invented this technology, they have a facility in Texas.
Yeah, I think it's in Houston.
It's in the Houston area. So that they do have facilities for people that like actually want to go and use the equipment if you don't want to bring it into your home.
That's great. Good to know. Yeah. And definitely we'll put that in the show notes, because I'm sure a lot of people will be super, super interested.
Yeah.
So, now that we're here, we spoke about gadgets and hormones and peptides and supplements. So I'm going to ask you guys the same question. So if somebody like a caregiver now wanted to get started and is like, okay, I deserve to feel better. I need to feel better. So I'm here so I can show up for the person I'm caring for and myself. Of course, that would be nice too. What would be the first 3 steps? And we've already talked about some of the steps, but if you could just kind of put them back into like a little structure for the listeners.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is to get your blood work done.
Blood work.
And there's a lot of great resources that we have. You actually don't need a doctor to order your own blood work. You can go, there's plenty of websites now. You can go order it online, and then you just take the form into a LabCorp or a Quest Diagnostics, which most people have within 20 to 30 minutes of where they live, and get that done. We have a great resource. There's a company I'm working on called RX Owl, as in owl, the animal, OWL. And what we're doing is we're actually building a platform to bring the best hormone doctors in the country and match them with people based on their personality, based on their location and everything. So I can have a link for that to people to fill that out. Basically, they just pay $19. It's a one-time fee. It's not recurring or anything like that. And RxOwl will match them with a hormone doctor as many times as they need to find the right doctor. So that's a big project. We're both involved because obviously that's like one of the biggest issues that we have with people that we coach is it's hard for them to find a doctor that prescribes hormones the right way. But I think in terms of hierarchy is get blood work done. And again, you don't need a doctor to do that. And then find a doctor, and it doesn't have to be through us, that can help you on a hormone journey, because that's going to be the foundation. And I think for a lot of people, especially on the caregiver side of the equation, peptides are amazing. You can even start peptides before you get into the hormones, but I always just recommend that people get that addressed first, because a lot of times they don't have a snapshot of where their body's at. So they don't understand like, hey, I feel all these bad things. I feel anxious. I feel depressed. I have no energy. I've got all these inflammation issues. They don't know actually what the root of that issue is. And in many cases, that could just be replacing hormones for people. And so that's the first thing and the first step along the way is get your blood work done, go find a hormone doctor. And then from there, that's probably going to take a 3 to 6 month period of where you get on hormones and your body adapts. And then from there, a lot of times people can build into doing some of the GLP peptides or some of these other peptides that we talked about. It's not that you can't start those things before hormones, but I've just seen so many people, they don't want to have to acknowledge that something is wrong. Like I've had so many people in my family, they don't feel good, but they don't want to acknowledge that something is wrong. They don't want to admit that to them, it's kind of, like I don't want to admit that I'm a defunct person, that something could be wrong on my blood work or something might not be optimal. And I think usually the first step is getting the blood work done to say, hey, okay, like this is the first step. And once you go from there, the rest of it is, just getting linked in with the right people. That's again why we have the community, and it doesn't have to be our community, but just to get to know other people. But I think if so many people just took that one step, I think a lot of times for me, what I've seen is that realization of seeing the blood work, it becomes real, because now you see numbers on a piece of paper that are indisputable. They're like, hey, as much as you could tell yourself that something's not wrong, we can see it in the blood work.
Yeah, I love that. So data, get your baseline, just get over the shame or any of that. It's not your fault. It's your biology. That's it. Like it's not going to go away. Denial just literally doesn't work at all. So try to face it, because you know what? You're going to feel amazing. And then use, by the way, there are no other tools. So I've looked everywhere. So definitely check out their tool to find a practitioner, and we'll put that in the show notes. Find that practitioner that will help you with hormones, right? That means sex hormones, but also thyroid, and then dive into the peptides. And your community has been amazing for all of that. What do you think, Taylor? Anything you'd like to add there for the?
No, nothing. Yeah, I think Hunter nailed it. Getting in touch with the right doctors, blood work, so important. And then I like to always just say the peptides are like the sprinkles on top.
Yeah.
Because everybody loves sprinkles. And think of the peptides as the sprinkles on top after you get all your foundational work done.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So again, I know that some people are going to feel overwhelmed. Please don't feel overwhelmed. Take things one step at a time, get your data first. And then there's so much to learn from this lovely couple here. And you guys have so much in your content, in your YouTube, in your podcast, and in the community. And now you're developing new things. So if someone is listening and thinking, okay, I want in, where can they find you? What's the best way to start with you guys?
Mine. So I used to have a YouTube channel once upon a time. It got deleted. Obviously, people in this world are no secret to
Google.
social media getting deleted. If you even talk about some of these subjects, it's like, you're going to get kicked off. So mine, everything is on Spotify. So if you just go on Spotify or iTunes, it's on iTunes as well. Just type in Hunter Williams podcast on there. That's where Spotify has the videos. iTunes just has the audio version. I think for now they might be rolling out the video on iTunes soon, but that's the easiest way to find my content. We're on like Instagram and stuff, but we don't really do that much there. We focus a little bit more on the long form content. So mine's on Spotify. If you just search my name on there, and then
so my handle on Instagram and YouTube is Taylor Williams Coaching, and on that's where you can find all of my content, and then also all of the links, my link tree to be able to, how to find out how to work with us are all on there as well too.
Yeah. And if you do want to send us a message, please you'll see an email usually in those links, or you can sign up for our email list. Send us an email, because we get so many messages like on Instagram and all the other platforms and stuff. Email is usually the best way, because that's the one that we check and usually get back to people. And then obviously too, inside of our private group, that's what we have that for, so people can talk with us directly.
And both newsletters are amazing, by the way. I didn't even talk about it before, but like so much good information. So just before we close, and I might at some point ask you guys to come back to just dig deeper into one of these things, because I know we covered so much. But if I had to ask you, and I know it's such a hard one because we just talked about the kitchen sink, but what's one thing that made the biggest impact on your health? One thing, not what you recommend to your clients, but for yourself, for your own health.
For myself, I would say, and it's probably gonna be Hunter's answer too, but for me, it's gonna be therapeutic testosterone.
You were gonna say that
has made the biggest difference, only because fertility is where we are at in our journey, and I did not, and this is no secret. I talk about this a lot, is that I did not start ovulating until using injectable therapeutic testosterone from years prior to being on synthetic birth control. So for me, it's definitely been testosterone for sure.
And sorry, before you start, Hunter, again, I really, really hope that people are listening to what you just said right now. Very healthy, really optimized, but you had to find that out on your own, which most people will never find that out. So I really hope this is going to reach a lot of people. Get over that shame. There's no shame. It's literally your biology. So thank you for sharing that. Amazing.
And then just to be completely, I mean, I'm also, I'll be 36 in May. So I started hormone replacement therapy when I was 32. I was 32 when I started hormone replacement therapy. So, and that's something that a lot of people would not think because of the age that I'm at, that I didn't need it, but I did. So, I definitely can't say enough. Please go get your blood work done and get your hormones checked.
Amazing. Thank you, Taylor. Hunter?
Well, just not to have the same answer, I will say I have a book, I wrote a book about testosterone, and it's just kind of like my journey with testosterone. It's on Amazon and everything. But I will actually say, just to be different from Taylor, I think GLPs and what we talked about around GLPs, I was in this world before GLPs were ever a thing. So I had done peptides, I'd done hormones and everything. And of course, it was amazing for my life. Like testosterone really helped heal me, not just physically, but like emotionally and mentally too, from being in some pretty bad places in my life, and a lot of that can go back to hormones. But I will say the improvement in how I feel using GLPs and just the overall change that has, obviously physically, but kind of from like a neurocircuitry standpoint of like reducing brain inflammation, also reducing addiction to food, or not only addiction to food, but like addiction to compulsive habits. I wasn't someone that ever really struggled with addiction, but I will just say my life, my mental clarity, just how I do everything has been vastly enhanced by GLPs. So I think for the people, especially kind of in our alternative health world, they may think that that's like a big pharma psyop to just get everyone hooked on GLPs. We do all of our GLPs outside of big pharma. We don't have to go into that, but big pharma makes no money on Taylor and I using GLPs via the routes that we do it. And I would say GLPs have vastly improved and enhanced my life beyond all those other foundational things that we're doing for the better.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. And honestly, if there's one thing I'm hoping from this episode is that a lot of people will discover you guys, because I feel you're like this amazing. I mean, you have so much following, but it's a huge hidden secret from like my community. And a lot of people didn't know probably about you. So I'm hoping that it's going to open a lot of people's eyes. And I encourage everybody to listen to your content and watch your content. And yes, I know you have a book on testosterone. I'm going to also link that in the show notes. So I believe it's going to help a lot of people and friends. Go ahead, share this episode with other friends, with family members, and let's help our community, because I think this is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nadia, so much. We can't thank you enough. One for being in our community, but also doing this work. There's very few people that are brave and bold enough to put this out there. So thank you not only for supporting us, but doing this work, because we need people like you out there doing this and that have the courage and bravery to do so. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. You're literally like an angel. So I can't thank you enough for everything that you do and for spreading this word and to spreading the awareness of this, because it's so important. It's so needed.
Thank you guys.